The little girl was crying quietly beside a shopping cart while her father stared in disbelief at the young cashier whose hands were trembling so badly she could barely scan a carton of milk. What began as an ordinary afternoon grocery trip would soon uncover a heartbreaking secret that neither of them would ever forget. In a world where people often look away from pain, one simple question would change two lives forever. Before we begin, if you believe that kindness still exists and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps us bring more emotional and inspiring stories to people around the world. The sun hung brightly over the city that afternoon as Mason Carter pushed a grocery cart through a neighborhood supermarket. At 38 years old, life had not turned out the way he once imagined. 3 years earlier, he had lost his wife, and ever since then, every day had been a balancing act between raising his 7-year-old daughter, Ava, and keeping his small construction business running. Some days felt manageable. Other days felt impossibly heavy. But he always kept moving forward because Ava depended on him. That afternoon had already been exhausting. A long morning at work, unexpected bills waiting at home, and a school project Ava needed help with later that evening had left him mentally drained. Ava sat in the cart seat clutching a stuffed rabbit while chatting about a drawing she had made in school. Mason listened carefully, smiling whenever he could. Moments like these reminded him why he never gave up. After collecting their groceries, they joined the checkout line. The store was busy but calm. Families chatted, shopping carts rolled across polished floors, and sunlight streamed through the large front windows. Everything seemed normal until Mason noticed the cashier. She looked young, perhaps in her early 20s. Her name tag read Riley Monroe. At first glance, she appeared focused on her work, but something felt wrong. Her hands shook noticeably as she scanned items. A bottle nearly slipped from her grip. Her face looked pale, and dark circles rested beneath tired eyes. She kept glancing toward the entrance as though she expected something terrible to happen at any moment. Most customers seemed annoyed by the delay. Some sighed impatiently. Others avoided eye contact. But Mason couldn't ignore what he was seeing. As Riley scanned his groceries, her hands trembled even more. A package slipped and fell onto the counter. She quickly apologized and reached for it, but the shaking became impossible to hide. Without thinking, Mason gently asked why her hands were shaking so much. The question seemed to freeze the world around them. For a moment, Riley simply stared at him. Her eyes widened as if nobody had ever asked. Then something unexpected happened. Tears began gathering in her eyes. She lowered her head and tried to continue working, but the emotions she had been holding back all day finally surfaced. Her voice barely rose above a whisper as she explained that she had been awake for nearly 40 hours. Mason's expression changed immediately. Riley revealed that her mother was in the hospital across town. She was battling a serious illness, and doctors had recently informed the family that her condition was worsening. Riley spent every night beside her mother's bed and worked full shifts during the day because she couldn't afford to lose her job. Medical bills had consumed their savings. Rent was overdue. Her younger brother depended on her. Every day felt like a race against disaster. The trembling wasn't caused by fear alone. It was exhaustion, hunger, stress, and the crushing weight of responsibilities that no 22-year-old should have to carry alone. As she spoke, she looked embarrassed, almost ashamed that her struggles had become visible. But Mason felt something deeper than sympathy. He recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same look he had seen in the mirror during the darkest months after losing his wife. It was the look of someone carrying far more than they could bear. Ava listened quietly from the cart. Her small face grew serious. The transaction ended, and Riley forced a smile before thanking them. Most customers would have left and forgotten the encounter within minutes. Mason almost did. He pushed the cart toward the exit, but something stopped him. Outside, the warm afternoon sunlight felt different somehow. He loaded groceries into the car while Riley's story echoed in his mind. He remembered nights spent wondering how he would pay bills after his wife passed away. He remembered feeling invisible while silently drowning in grief. Then Ava tugged on his sleeve. She asked whether the cashier was okay. Mason hesitated before answering that he didn't think she was. Ava looked toward the store entrance and said something simple that struck him deeply. She said that if someone was sad, maybe they needed a friend. Children often see truths adults overlook. Mason stood silently for several moments. Then he made a decision. He returned inside. The store manager was surprised when Mason requested a private conversation. After explaining what he had learned, he asked whether there was a safe way to help Riley without making her uncomfortable. The manager sighed heavily and admitted that everyone on staff knew she was struggling. She never complained, never asked for help, and never missed a shift despite everything happening in her life. That evening, Mason reached out to several local business owners he knew. Over the years, he had built strong relationships within the community. One phone call became 3. 3 became 10. By nightfall, something remarkable had begun. The following week, anonymous donations started arriving. A local landlord offered temporary rent assistance. A grocery supplier provided food vouchers. Several community members contributed toward hospital expenses. Even the supermarket employees organized a fundraiser. Riley had no idea who started it. She only knew that suddenly, people seemed to care. For the first time in months, she could breathe. Days later, Mason and Ava returned to the store. Riley looked different. The exhaustion remained, but hope had returned to her eyes. She greeted customers with genuine warmth. The shaking had nearly disappeared. When she saw Mason and Ava, tears filled her eyes once again. She had eventually learned that Mason was the person who first reached out for help on her behalf. She struggled to find words. No speech seemed large enough to express what his kindness had done. Mason simply smiled and told her that everyone needs help sometimes. Months passed. Riley's mother responded better to treatment than doctors had expected. Recovery remained difficult, but progress was happening. Her younger brother returned to focusing on school instead of worrying about losing their home. Slowly, life began rebuilding itself. One bright afternoon nearly a year later, Mason received a handwritten letter. Inside, Riley described how one simple question had changed everything. Most people saw her shaking hands and looked away. Some became irritated. Others ignored her completely. But one person noticed her pain and cared enough to ask why. That question reminded her she wasn't invisible. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of kindness can create ripples far beyond what we can see. Special request: comment below with the word kindness if you believe one caring question can change someone's life. As the years moved forward, neither Mason nor Riley forgot that afternoon. The memory remained a powerful reminder that heroes rarely wear capes. Sometimes they stand quietly in grocery store lines. Sometimes they carry their own burdens while noticing someone else's pain. And sometimes, the most life-changing thing a person can do is simply ask a question that comes from the heart. Because behind every trembling hand, every forced smile, and every tired face, there may be a story waiting for someone kind enough to notice. And when compassion meets courage, even the darkest chapters can begin to turn into something beautiful.